You're listening to the Hawke Media Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and executives crush the digital marketing game. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's get into the show.
All right, you're listening to HawkeTalk. We're here today with InQ. How are you?
Doing really good, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for being on. So, got to take it back. Going back to your birth, did you pop out in the living room and immediately start, dropping some poetry, getting snaps? How did it start? Where are you born? Let's say, where were you born? Let's start with that.
I was born in Santa Monica, where you live.
Yeah.
And, raised there, never left pretty much.
Nice.
I went to San Fran State for a quick minute and then decided to come back and pursue art full time. And although I've traveled all around the world, Los Angeles is in my bones.
Amen. We were just talking about that. I don't think I'd want to live any other place. So when you were early childhood, were you immediately drawn to poetry as when you first started talking? Were you into music? Where did that trigger hit? How was your early childhood with your parents, et cetera?
So my dad was not in the picture at all.
Okay.
And I didn't meet him until I was 15 years old. And we didn't have the best relationship even after we were able to connect. I can count on two hands at least how many times we were in the same room together. My mom's a school teacher and taught at Culver City Junior High. She taught history and then she taught special education. And my mom's a really interesting person. She's from Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Was raised there in the 50s and then decided to join the Peace Corps. She was in Liberia. Wow. And then she came back and, marched with Martin Luther King. She was certainly into civil and equal rights.
How you say that casually, march with Martin Luther King.
Well, I'm not saying that she was marching arm in arm with him, but she was one of the people that was there.
Yeah.
She didn't stay at home.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then she decided that she wanted to help raise the next generation by being a teacher. And she wanted to follow her Southern California sunshine dreams. And so when she got pregnant, she moved out, and this is where I lived my life. And I'm definitely a Cali boy. We grew up, I guess, on Lincoln and Bay Street. You familiar?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that was
on the beach, pretty central.
Yes, exactly. And I don't really have a lot of memories of my childhood, to be honest. So I don't really recall whether or not I was eloquent or rhythmic or rhyming when I was a kid or anything like that. But from what my mom tells me, she used to make up these lullabies. And I was very interested in maybe the way words sounded. But I didn't really fall in love with, I would say, rhyming until Parents Just Don't Understand by Will Smith.
And how old were you?
I don't remember, once again. I don't really have I have a range.
Yeah.
I mean, I was probably 8 or 9 or 10, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember relating to the song.
Yeah, great song.
I had heard Run DMC and all that stuff, and I loved it, but I loved all sorts of music, and whatever would come on, I'd kind of jam out to. I didn't have an older brother to put me up on things. So I was just figuring it out. My mom used to play Bette Midler and Frank Sinatra in the house. And anyway, so then I hear Parents Just Don't Understand. And I was like, man, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, parents just don't understand. They don't, So then we were going to visit my mom in, I'm sorry, not my mom, but our cousin in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I begged my mom to go take me to one of the, record stores or whatever. And I bought this single of Parents Just Don't Understand. And I went back to my cousin's house and I just put it in the boombox and I played it, and I would stop, and then I'd write down a sentence, and then I'd rewind, and then I'd play it, stop, right? And I wrote the whole entire song. And then I just played it and then rapped all of the lyrics. And I was in there for like 4 hours. And there was something about it that felt right. And then, just kind of took on a life of its own after that.
And so again, you're 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere in there. And did you go back to middle school, high school and start performing, or like, where did it go from there?
No, the first performance I had, actually this kid had gotten killed in a drive-by, and he was like a friend of, everyone knew him, and so I wrote something for him, and then I like performed it at camp or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was the first time I ever did something that I had written out loud, and it was meant to honor him.
Yeah.
So I remember I like started tearing up as I was doing it.
And do you remember how old you were?
Then I was like 13.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
you did get started pretty early too. And being, I mean, a 13-year-old writing something that would bring you to tears and actually putting it to words and performing it. I feel like most teenagers and preteens are not that in touch with their own emotions and like expressing them that way. So do you know where that came from? Like, where do you think you were?
Well, that came from trying to give you tribute to this person.
Yeah.
But I was always like a very sensitive kid, and I never really felt like I belonged.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but
I think it's common with people that are going down a unique path, so to speak.
Yeah. Like I always, I think not having a dad, especially like externalized like a lot of my identity. I was always kind of like looking outside of myself for what I was supposed to be like, or what a man was supposed to be like, or what a young man was supposed to be like, a boy. And so it just made me kind of ask a lot of questions. And then also my mom had gotten me a scholarship to a private school when I was younger. And like a lot of the kids were really rich, and we were not. And they all had 2 parents. And I felt like I connected with everybody, but I always felt a little bit different. And then I went to public school for junior high and high school. And I think I felt a little bit different there too. And it took me a second to kind of like settle in. And so I think I was always finding myself in situations where I was looking from the outside in, and it made me very just aware of my thoughts and my emotions. And then I think that poetry and hip hop became my outlet for that.
Yep.
More than anything else,
And so starting at 13, you performed. When was the point that you figured like, this is something I could actually pursue? Like I would want to do this for a living for the rest of my life kind of thing.
Well, okay. They're the same, but they're also compartmentalized, like hip hop and poetry. It's all about rhyming and rhythm and communication and performance, emotion. But for me, they were also very separate. In terms of the hip hop side of things, I think when I was 15, we snuck into a club. Me and my boys, we got into this club, and they were older than me. And it was like an 18 and over club or something like that. And so they were doing like a rap battle on stage. And I had done a lot of battling too, just like you battle kids at school, and then you leave school, and then somebody's having a cypher, and then you battle with them, and you just like start collecting these notches on your belt, And there was a dude on stage, and they were like, he was battling people, and I just like got up and I started battling him, and he was just so much bigger than me. Yeah. It was like, it looked ridiculous that I would be battling this dude, and I won. and everyone, it was like 250 people in the club or something, and they all just went crazy. And I remember that was like the most empowered that I had ever felt in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, I just want to do that forever. And then when I was like, I don't know, 16 or 17,
Yep.
I got invited to go to the UCLA Young Writers Retreat. The UCLA Young Writers Retreat would take kids from all over Los Angeles, different high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically, like, for the most part, paid for them. You would pay a little bit, but they really would hook you up to be able to go to this place in Lake Arrowhead. It was like 100, 150 kids. And they would put on these writing workshops for like 2 or 3 days. And at the time I was like, I'll just go meet girls, like I was like, not even really interested in the writing portion of it. I was always horrible in math, but I was always good with words. Uh-huh. So English, it just came like a first language, actually.
Nice.
So I go to this UCLA Young Writers Retreat, and I'm like sitting there on the first day, and they had this poet, this guy, Jack Grapes, who's still around doing books and facilitating workshops. And he was our facilitator. And he went through this whole entire session with us where we learned how to write poetry. And I don't remember what he did, and I don't remember what I wrote, and I don't remember how it affected me. The only thing that I remember is that I thought, I didn't know you could be a poet for a living.
Yeah.
Like, it had never even occurred to me that was even a job.
Yeah.
So that's where these two things were compartmentalized.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept making albums, and, I thought I was going to be an MC for the rest of my life and have, huge platinum records and sell out stadiums. But life has other plans. When I was 19, I wound up at this open mic for poets in Los Angeles called the Poetry Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out to be the biggest, if not one of the biggest poetry lounges in the whole country. We were getting 350 people every single week for forever, like for 15, 20 years, that would just show up. And it was like church without religion. People were getting celebrated for their vulnerability and talking about social issues, things that mattered to them. And so anyway, I just started doing my rapping a cappella. Yep. And people responded to it and started calling it poetry, and I didn't correct them. And that was kind of the beginning of the poetic journey for me. This is a long ass answer, but I'll tie it up with a bow.
Okay, we got time.
And then,
so were you in San Francisco State, you said, was that when you were there, and did you like drop out at that point, or?
No. So when I graduated from high school, went to San Francisco State for like, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And then came back. Then I went to SMC, and they put me in remedial math.
Yeah.
They put me in the bottom math thing. Then they put me under that. It was the lowest possible. And there was so many like classes I had to pass to get up. And I just wasn't a great student, man. I didn't really care. I got in a fist fight on campus, and I was like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I wanted to pursue, my art full time. And so I did. And during the whole time that I would go back to the Poetry Lounge, I just had interim period jobs that allowed me to kind of scrape by. I ended up getting on HBO's Def Poetry Jam. We won the National Poetry Slam Championships. And one day I woke up and I realized I was more of a poet than an MC. And then I had to figure out how to monetize that. And to come really full circle, then I got a call from the UCLA Young Writers Retreat.
Interesting.
All of those years later. And they were like, hey, we would love for you to come and be the facilitator this year. And I said, that's incredible, because it had a pretty profound impact on me when I was a kid. Yeah. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I went there. And they were like, what are you talking about? Because they didn't know me as NQ. They knew me as Adam Schmalholtz. So I guess the moral of the story is you're always right where you're supposed to be.
I agree with you. Okay, so you get out of college, you start pursuing this, you're working some odd jobs. At what point did you start, during that transition, what point did you start making a living off this, that you could really be a full-time poet?
Oh, man. I mean, I was past just shy of 30 or just past 30.
So it took about a decade since college, or a little over.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Because I always like to dive into the story. Like, what kind of jobs were you doing like during that time, and what caused you to stick with it? Because a lot of people wouldn't give their passion so much time, and I think it's a good thing, to be clear, obviously, and it's worked out. But a lot of people, they'll give it a couple of years. I hear people all the time, whether it's acting or music or even sports, whatever. I'm going to give it 2 years, and if it doesn't work out, I'm out. And you gave it 12 before you were able to make a living out of it. So like, two things on that. What were you doing to make a living during that time? And then what also like pushed you to stick with it? Or did you never have any doubts?
No, I had a bunch of doubts.
I think you're human. That's why I asked.
Yeah. I mean, it's cute to be struggling when you're like in your early 20s, because you're like a Renaissance artist and you're figuring it out, and girls don't care. And they're like, he's talented. And you're like, let me tell you something, man. When you're broke and you're like 29, 30, it's not cute. You really have to take a look at yourself and say, is this working? Mm-hmm. I mean, originally I was, I did everything from folding clothes at Gap. And then I, started breakdancing at bar mitzvahs.
That's awesome.
Now, I wasn't like a good break dancer.
Yeah.
I was like a pretty mediocre one, but we had a dance crew. And the thing is, I made $200, for the 4 hours. Mm-hmm. You show up and you do your thing and then you leave. And $200 at that time, when you're 19, 20 years old, well, that winds up being $800 a month, maybe $1,000 if you get an extra gig, and you can kind of scrape by on that, Yep. Not anymore, but at the time you could.
Yeah.
And then after that, I worked as a night receptionist because I was just like writing the whole entire time. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I ran the Westwood Rec Center.
Nice.
Like literally, I like shut down the gyms at night and handled racquetball and would break up fights. And, people would have questions about their kids in the classes and the summer camps. And I would just answer phones and I would rhyme, literally. And then when I was like 26, I decided I was going to go full time. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And I was really scraping by. You'd get like $500 gig here, $1,000 gig there.
Yeah.
I remember somebody owed me $50 from a gig and I drove to their house.
Yeah.
Like I needed it.
Yeah.
Change in the couch type stuff. And I just basically like kept going because I didn't have a plan B. I hadn't finished college. I didn't really have anything else that I wanted to do. And I was also just obsessed, Erik. Like there was something that no matter how much I wanted to quit, I just kept writing new pieces and I kept performing them places and people kept responding. So even though I wasn't getting the monetary validation, I was getting other validation.
Yeah. And you say this whole story with a smile on your face. When you were talking about the struggling and the change in the couch, you got a smile, which I think most people don't understand. Is there like almost a nostalgia to that time where it was like so simple and you're just figuring out that little next step? Like it's hard times, don't get me wrong, and like objectively, but I don't know. It seems like there's almost a positive emotion associated with that time.
Well, because hopefully if you're living life right, everything that you look back on will have a positive nostalgia.
Touche. No, that's very fair.
You look back and you think, okay, even if I don't understand it, I'm grateful that it happened because it's made me who I am.
Yeah.
Those specific times, you could also argue that when you're closer to survival, things are simpler.
I was gonna say, I went through similar where it was like, I had a credit card that went back in 2004. I remember calling the credit card company and like with my buddies, I was 18 and they're like, how much money do you make a year? And I said, $1 million. I made no money. And they went, okay, we've approved you for a $25,000 a month credit card. And I'm like, thank you. And they sent this thing to me. So I get out of college and I just loaded the thing. I literally maxed the thing out, just trying to like live way beyond my means. And so I'd get to the end of every month. I had a minimum credit card bill due that I had to pay, and I'd have no money in the bank. And I'd like find whatever I could in the fridge, similar like change in the couch to figure out that last week every month. And I do look back at that positively because I also think there's a freedom in knowing that you can deal with that. Like, even if you get to that level of broke, it's like, yeah, but I've been through that. It's not fun. It's not that bad though. It's not devastating. And you figure it out. Like I have that. That's why I asked, just because I have that same kind of thought back to that where, I mean, end of literally the last week of every month, I was broker than broke. I was 25 grand in debt with a credit card bill due and no cash in the bank.
But I think it would be devastating now. I think that you look back on it from the memory of who you were at that time, from the age that you were at that time.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you have different responsibilities now. I was looking at a documentary the other day, and part of the documentary kind of explored this woman that does emotional and mental therapy around homeless people who have finally gotten temporary housing. Mm-hmm. And what she said is that oftentimes when people are living on the street, they're so close to survival and they're so focused on whatever they need to do next that they actually don't have time to deal with some of the traumas that they have experienced because they have to focus on shelter or safety or their next meal. And when they get, temporary housing, she said all this stuff really starts to come up. So, I think, I don't know what I think. I think that was a time in my life, and I think this is another time in my life, and hopefully I'll look back on this time with nostalgia. And also, I guess things come up when you have space for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so 31, you start really making a living with this. When was kind of the next inflection point that you felt like, wow, when's the I've made it feeling come in? Or has it come in?
I don't feel like that now. I mean,
okay.
No, I don't know. Sometimes people read my bio and I'm like, who's that?
A little imposter syndrome. Like, what are you talking about?
No, it's not imposter syndrome. I know, I don't mean to push back just to push back, but it's not. It's I don't feel like an imposter. I know that I'm great at what I do. I know I've worked really hard for it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it just came to me naturally. And I'm like, oh, I got that. I don't look at my talent like that at all. It's been, outlier hours times 2 or 3 at this point. But I do have this like separation from my bio or the accomplishments that I've made because I know the 1,000 hidden heartbreaks that it took to make one of those things come true.
Yeah.
You know what's happening behind the curtain. And so I'm not so impressed with my accolades. Yeah. I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
But I'm not impressed by them.
I get the distinction, and I think it's important. I have the same feeling. It's like, it's an honor, and it's, as you said, there's a pride with it, but it's not like it makes you feel like it can be deserved, but it doesn't make you better. I think.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I totally agree. And so going back to kind of that next stage, like 31, making a living, is there another point where you felt like you hit sort of an inflection point? It doesn't have to be that you made it, but like that another inflection point where you're like, this is any of that, whether it's that time you were introduced to bio or an accolade you did get that felt like a milestone.
Well, so during that period of time, I wasn't even starting to make money on poetry. What ended up happening was um, I was doing all these shows around Los Angeles. Like I would just do 200-person shows and we'd sell out, but it wasn't easy. Like I had to do the flyers and but I sold out like 20 of them. And I would always put up different material and they were like quite the scene. And, it was cool. It was interesting. And people responding to it. And then I had a production company that ended up coming to one of the shows, and the production company made like all sorts of music. So they invited me to come down, and I started writing lyrics for other pop artists, basically. And that was where I started making money.
Yeah.
Is they signed me to a publishing deal. And the first one I wrote, I think, like Miley Cyrus ended up singing it, and then she did it on the Billboard Awards. And then the next one, I was able to like co-write Selena Gomez, Love You Like a Love Song. And, I wasn't even really listening to these artists like personally, but it was an opportunity to be creative in a new way. And I had to like monetize my talents in some form or fashion. I was just kind of tired of being broke.
And there's something about being open. Yeah. Like a lot of people get so focused, where I have friends that are musicians that are like, no, I'm going to do it my way, this way. And they're, in their 40s now and still doing it their way. No one else is listening, but there's something to be said about also hearing, like going, not want to say least path of resistance, but taking the opportunity when it arises too, and not being stubborn about it.
Yeah, look, if you're holding on to the rocks and you're in the river, it's a giant waste of energy.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to pull yourself
right.
As might as you just kind of turn around and float and, look where you want to go.
Yep. Yeah.
But also kind of like trust the river a little bit. And I think if you don't, you can wind up holding on to rocks your whole entire life.
Yeah.
I think like when I look back at that particular situation of songwriting, and now I've written like probably over 50 Disney television movie songs over the years, and had gold records and platinum records, things that I never would have imagined myself doing when I was like battling somebody on stage when I was a kid. But those things made me a better artist. Yeah. Because my poetry is very choppy and rhythmic, and I can fit so much information into one poem, and it's about me or something that bothers me in the world, something social or political, whereas like when I'm writing something for an artist, and by the way, I've also since written for Foster the People and Aloe Black, and I've had a wide range of experience as a songwriter now, but I basically have to use my imagination to fit my truth into someone else's truth. And I have to use less words. So I have to have concepts that are deep and simple. Like if you're writing a pop song, you don't want someone to think very much, but you do want it to be deep so that they can return to it over and over and over again, so that it has some layers in it. And so those are tools that I ended up having from those experiences of songwriting that I would not have had if I never got into it. And when I went back to my poetry, those tools were still there. So I was able to kind of like use them in my own work. And I think it made me a better artist.
That's awesome. And so a couple more questions for you, man. Number one, what's next? You've got all this going on. You're starting to explore. We were talking before this, explore kind of the next phase. What do you have in mind? What do you think's kind of coming down the road for you? Or what do you want to be?
Yeah, I mean, look, we just came out with this book, Inquire Within. It's about a year old now, but the pandemic was like, thank you, man. The pandemic was like the never ending now. So it's really hard to know what my timeline is. And then I do all of these company and corporate shows now. I mean, I literally, before the pandemic, was doing 60 to 70 shows a year, traveling around the country and the world, doing keynote speeches, and then facilitating these poetry workshops. And I love doing that. And we've started to do them online as well. So now I've been like getting communities together to do these online workshops that are just fans of mine. And then I'm also getting hired to come in and do companies.
So I was in yours in 2016 on Summit at Sea. I did.
Oh, awesome. Wow. That's so crazy, bro.
Yeah. No, it was great. That's awesome that you're doing that, because I really enjoyed it. And as a guy that I think I'd roll my eyes a little bit at poetry in high school and always loved music. So I respect it. And now I'm a little more mature that I can respect it. But yeah, it was awesome to sit down and do that as someone that's very left brain for the most part these days. Was it right brain? No, it's left brain. We're good. Yeah. And so last question for you is someone that, again, really stuck with it a lot more than most people do and really pursued your passion. And now, you glazed over it a little bit, but you gave some anecdotes like platinum and gold records, getting to tour around, doing poetry, getting paid well, doing what you love. What would be your advice for someone that's just starting out that has dreams of their own, like something that you don't think that they've heard that you wish you were told or you were told that helped you get through the hard time, so to speak?
I think that you just have to realize that there is no one like you. You're the only you in the entire universe. There's, 8 billion people on the planet. And so we're all as unique as snowflakes, but we're falling with 8 billion other snowflakes and melting on a snowbank. But we're still miracles, each one. And nobody has your specific voice or your specific experience or your specific perspective. And so I would say just trust yourself and then trust life. Faith is a conscious choice, so you have to trust the river and you have to float with it. And then the last thing is you have to work really hard.
Yep.
You have to put your love and your time into your passion. And just because you love something and just because you're passionate about it, it's not enough. Love is not enough. Passion is not enough. You also have to put your time and your hard work. So know that your voice is unique, have faith in life, and work harder than everybody else.
Amen. Well, NQ, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
You've been listening to the Hawke Media Podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, make sure to subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.